Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today in the middle of downtown Copenhagen, Denmark, because where I'm standing right now is the site of a really cool historical event in the development of small arms, specifically the first combat use of repeating firearms. Where I am is basically on the Storm Bridge. Actually, the Storm Bridge by name is that one right over there. All of these bridges are relatively new, however, and this is on a canal that separates the land behind us from the Christiansborg, the castle at the center of Denmark. And on the night of February 10th and 11th, 1659, Swedish forces attacked from, they were in the middle of doing unfortunately, a pretty good job of invading Denmark, and they attacked from behind me, well, in front of me, back there, towards the castle here. They'd taken that part of the outskirts of the city. They were trying to capture the castle, and so they had to go over this canal that I'm standing on top of right now. Now, it was February and extremely cold, and so they had planned to cross this canal using storm ladders. Well, the Dutch had decided to help out the Danes in this war, and they'd gotten their hands on one of those storm ladders, measured how long it was, and told the Danes. So the Danish soldiers knew what the reach of these ladders were, and so they got down onto the ice and hacked big holes in the ice, longer than the Swedes' ladders. That left the Swedes with a bit of a difficulty in crossing this canal. And that difficulty was made a bit worse when the Danish castle guards came out, armed with the top-notch, cutting-edge weaponry of the time, Kalthoff repeating rifles. Now, the Kalthoff was, like I said, the very first practical repeating arm out there, and it was a flintlock that carried inside the action of the gun was a magazine for powder and another magazine for projectiles, kind of similar to the Collier revolvers, which we've looked at previously. But here, those guns were actually used in combat by the Danish Royal Guards against attacking Swedish troops. And they actually successfully defended these canals and successfully defended the castle with those arms, drove off the attack. And this is where we were, 1659. First use of repeating arms. So a very cool landmark here. And let's go ahead and take a closer look at one of those Kalthoff rifles now.
The background to this is with a guy by the name of Hermann Kalthoff, and he was born in Solingen, what is now Germany, in 1540, and lived until 1610 or the early 1610s. And he had 5 sons who would become this dynasty of gunsmiths, essentially, or he produced this dynasty of gunsmiths. His sons became like the Kalthoff diaspora across Europe. The system was developed about 1630 by his sons. I haven't been able to figure out if it was one of them or if it was all of them working together, but once they had this system figured out, they went ahead and started patenting it, and they started taking their services to the various royal courts of Europe. So this was first patented actually in France by William Kalthoff in 1640. It was then patented in what is now the Netherlands by one of the other Kalthoff brothers in 1641. We had Peter Kalthoff, born in 1600. He and his younger brother Mathias Kalthoff both went to work for the Danish crown. That was Frederick III at the time, and it is the two of them who would build more than 100 of these guns for the Danish Royal Guard. We also have Caspar Kalthoff, born in 1606. He went to England and worked for King Charles I of England. His son, by the way, Caspar Jr., worked for Charles II of England, as well as Tsar Alexis I of Russia. Henrik was born in 1610. He went to work for the crowns of Sweden and Norway. And William, or Guillaume, Kalthoff, I don't know exactly where he went, where he was working, but he's the one who actually filed the first patent on this in France. So he's actually identified on the patent as Guillaume, which is William anglicized. So that's the Kalthoff dynasty. Now, the way this gun fundamentally works is you have this operating lever on the bottom, and to cycle the gun, you rotate the lever all the way forward 180 degrees and then all the way back. And when you do that, it is going to take a projectile from a ball magazine under the barrel. This holds 30 rounds, I kid you not, 30 projectiles under the barrel here. It has a magazine of powder in the buttstock that's filled from the butt plate. It's going to take a ball from the magazine, it's going to ram it into the chamber, not just drop it in, but actually physically force it to a good seal in the chamber, is going to fill a powder charge behind. It's going to put powder in the priming pan, and it's going to recock the hammer. And then all you have to do is close the frizzen, pull the trigger, and boom, fires, reset this lever, and it does all of these processes for you, allows you to fire again. So this is 30 rounds in potentially extremely rapid succession. It's a 54 caliber gun. Powder charge is 33.1 grains of 2F black powder. And we know that from actually measuring the little powder transfer container. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go ahead and just take it apart and show you guys what the inside looks like, which is such a cool opportunity. All right, this is a very, very rare and very old gun. So I got some help taking the lock plate off of it so that I can show you how it works inside. But I'm not going to show you that actual process because there's no way I want to try and deal with doing it very carefully on camera. So here we have the lock plate removed. This, of course, would have sat right there. And inside, we can see just how cool and sophisticated this is. So first off, with the action, the basic functionality all comes from this gear. So when I press this button, which allows me to open the lever, and then as the lever rotates, you can see that this gear rotates. We have a cam here that's going to rotate, and we have a gear up inside the action that rotates. So there's that, it comes back. So this is performing a whole bunch of actions. Let's start up here. All right, when the process starts, the breech block is in this position, like all sealed up inside the action. And our process begins with one ball falling into this chamber, being held in here. So this is a chamber for the ball, this is for the powder charge, and this is for the excess powder that's used to prime the pan. Now, the ball comes out of this little tube right here. There's a little retaining spring on the side there. So when the breech block is all the way in place, it pushes that aside, which allows one ball to come out of here into the breech block, into that storage chamber. Now, those balls are stored inside the bottom of the stock right here. What appears to be a ramrod at the end of the barrel underneath, this is actually just a plug for the magazine tube, which is here. So to load the gun, you start by loading balls into this tube, and that runs all the way under the stock, all the way under the action, all the way under the barrel. And this will hold either 30 or 31 projectiles. It is 54 caliber, that's 4 Danish lines, and it is a rifled bore, interestingly. So, again, that puts us in this position with a ball sitting here, and let's say the gun has just fired. When I start to rotate this lever, I have a big old gear down here that's going to do a bunch of things. So you can see this pinion gear up inside the action cycling side to side as I rotate the lever. That's being done by this lever, and that pinion gear interacts with this rack on the bottom of the breech block. So as I start to turn this, the breech block is going to slide out this direction, and it's going to go until the ball is lined up with the barrel, and at the same time, this powder charge container, a section, is lined up with this channel right here. Inside our lock plate, fitting into that channel, is this metal tube. Now, let's back up on the gun for a moment, and the stock actually has a hollow compartment inside that holds powder, and we have a spring-loaded door right here. When the lever is completely closed, what happens is powder here, and you have to, by the way, tilt the gun downwards a bit to do this. Powder here comes out through this little compartment, this little channel in the bottom of the stock, and it fills up this compartment in the lever. So you can see we have two little doors here that are being held open when the lever is in the locked position. When I take this lever and I start to open it, you can see how this little door on its spring closes, that seals powder inside the stock, and we have a similar little door right here on the powder transfer container in the lever. So once this is open, this is now full. It has a 1 full powder charge for the gun. That is, by the way, 33.1 grains of 2F black powder. Now I'm going to open the lever all the way up, and at this end you can see that that door gets levered open again. Now I have the lock plate off right now, but normally what would happen is the lever is going to come into the lock plate, which has this matching powder canister, and as the lever closes, it's going to push this little door open. So now our powder is going to, you point the gun muzzle up, which is what you have to do to load a ball in that side, and it dumps the powder from this container into this container, which is sitting in this channel. The powder funnels all the way down this channel into this receptacle in the breech, and that's where it's actually going to detonate and fire. Now, at this point, the ball is lined up with the barrel, but it's still sitting in the breech block, and it has to be pushed into the barrel. On some guns, like the Lorenzoni, this is done just by gravity, and you don't have that good of a gas seal on it. On the Kalthoff, it's substantially more sophisticated. If we take a look at the inside of the lock plate again, you'll see we have this. This is a ramrod lever. It is being operated by these gear teeth on the side, well, these gear teeth right here, and that is going to push the ball into the chamber. So notice that we actually have a little plunger back here. It's spring-loaded, and when that ramrod right there goes forward, it's going to push this all the way out. It's going to force the ball into the chamber, and then as you continue to pull the lever, it's going to release, it's going to pull back, which allows the spring to reset this, and you end up with the ball rammed into the chamber here. Now we still have the breech block in this position. As it begins to go back, there's going to be a little bit of leftover powder in this chamber because this canister, this hollow core here, is going to be completely full. The remaining powder is dumped into this square hole, and we end up with the breech block back in this position, which makes it ready to fire. This hole isn't sealed. It actually opens up down here, so the powder is going to go in there, drop down the bottom, which drops it right down here into the priming pan. The way the hammer is cocked is by way of this little lever right here. So this is your sear. This is what's actually going to catch. That's the trigger right there, which releases it on the bottom. What happens is the gear teeth here are going to pull this back, which this is a very stiff spring, but when this goes back, when the gear teeth pull this forward, you can see right there, it's pulling this lever, which, if I hadn't already cocked the hammer, is going to pull this back and fully cock the system like that. I have now pulled it off completely. Then, once the hammer is fully cocked, the ramrod section here is free to move back and forth. So it can then ram the round into the chamber and then retract back so that it doesn't interfere with movement of the breech block. So ultimately, when you cycle this lever, it is going to recock the action, it's going to fill the priming pan, it's going to pull a ball out of the magazine, it's going to ram it into the chamber, it's going to load powder into essentially the chamber, into the breech block behind the chamber, ready to fire, and it reprimes the pan. It does everything for you, and all you have to do is pull the trigger on the thing. So with 30 balls on tap, this gives you a tremendous amount of repeating firepower. Now, one little element in this to also make note of is that there are two springs, little flat springs, that stay in, that are set in the breech block. There's one down here on the bottom, and there's one that sits here on the back of the breech block. And these are there specifically to put pressure on this, to hold it up and forward in the action. And that is done to get the best possible gas seal. Can't really get a perfect gas seal, but this allows it to be as good as you can get. So you'll get a little bit of gas leakage out here. One of the really cool things about the Kalthoff design is, unlike some of the later sort of less sophisticated guns, the powder is not directly connected to the action. So on Lorenzoni's, you'll have a powder chamber that drops powder directly into this sort of transfer cylinder that then fires it. And what that means is if you get a little bit of wear on that cylinder, it's possible to have a chain detonation go from the chamber back into the stock and detonate the whole gun. On the Kalthoffs, the powder's back here, and there is a completely independent moving chamber that transfers powder from the magazine to the actual firing chamber. So even like once this lever's in the back, there's nothing up here for if there's poor machining or a lot of wear on the gun. The worst you could have is a little bit of powder left in this compartment that vents forward and really doesn't cause any problems at all. This is much more protected against like a magazine detonation than you would have with some of the later guns. The Kalthoff really is a fantastic gun here. This is really tight and I don't want to try to force it open, but this is the hole in the buttstock where you would actually fill powder. So we have our powder compartment inside the buttstock, and that's the fill port. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can actually get this to cycle. This is 350 years old. Sometimes the gears skip a little bit, but push the button, which releases the lever, and then we will start the process here, and it's going to cock the hammer. There we go, there's half cock. You can see the breech block is coming out now. That's full cock. Then continue it all the way forward. It's going to load a powder charge there, so I would dump the, tilt the rifle forward, jiggle it, or I'm sorry, tilt the rifle backward a bit, lift the muzzle up. We jiggle it a little bit there to get the powder out of this, through here, and into the breech block, which, as you can see, has cycled over to the right. Then pull this back, powder chamber closes automatically. We're going to have a little bit of free travel here, and then the pinion re-engages on the breech block. Cycle that all the way closed and lock the lever in position. So now it's going to refill this powder canister with powder. You can see the hammer is fully cocked, and it has also reset the frizzen over the now charged primer pan. Now that the breech block is all the way in, the frizzen, which is screwed to it, is engaging this V-spring. So the frizzen has spring tension on it, and it's ready to fire. Now, the Kalthoff system would spread throughout Europe. This was, as far as I can tell, the first of the proper mechanical repeating flintlocks. And of course, that design was popular. That amount of firepower was something that people wanted. There were some developments of this system directly. For example, Peter Kalthoff in 1745 would develop and manufacture a wheel lock version of it, which would be super cool to find and film, but I haven't seen one of those in person. Of course, these are distributed across many of the royal houses of Europe, and they would lead to a number of similar systems, guns like the Lorenzoni. Now, the original Kalthoffs here are this horizontal lever. There would later be rotary lever versions, like axial ones, like the Lorenzoni. In terms of the Danish Royal Guard using these, the guys who first adopted them as a military weapon, they were completely out of service by 1696. And the reason is the guns are delicate and fragile. And we found that taking this one apart, you have to be really careful with it. Granted, it's 400 years old, between 350 and 400 years old at this point. So of course it's going to be a bit delicate, but the design itself requires a lot of finesse. This required armorers basically on call with the guns to keep them maintained. And they were absolutely not suitable for standing armies or armies in the field in Europe. For a very specialized elite unit like a Royal Guard, they could make a little bit of sense, and that's where we see them used. But even for those guys in Denmark, they were taken out of service in favor of something that was more reliable, more dependable. In a way, I think a good analogy to this could be a gun like the AN-94, the hyperburst Russian assault rifle, where, yes, it offers a capability that is definitely better, is advantageous compared to the standard rifles of the day, call it the AK-74, but it's a gun that's fragile and delicate, and when it breaks, then you're in trouble. And like the Kalthoff, the AN-94 goes out of service fairly quickly, because that's just not a trade-off that makes, in the long term, makes sense for a field military force. So this really is, as far as I can tell, the wellspring of our repeating firearms history. And it's been fantastic to get a chance to see this one. So I'd like to give a big thanks to Jan, the collector who owns this piece, who let me take a look at it. I've been wanting to find a Kalthoff for a long time. To find one that is actually from the Danish Royal Guard is the best possible one I could have asked for. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching the video as much as I enjoyed, well, not as much as I enjoyed making it, but hopefully you enjoyed it quite a lot. And thank you very much for watching.